Christmas special, The Sweater.
The shop smelled of dust and neglect, as charity shops often do. Rows of forgotten clothes hang limp, heirlooms of other lives and other objects. Objects that were held by someone before, and objects that held something within them. In the corner, almost hidden in a basket of knitwear, sat a sweater. But not just any kind of sweater. It was the ugliest sweater you've seen. Ugly in every conceivable way. A hideous shade of green with uneven patches of red and white, twisted patterns of reindeers and snowflakes stitched carelessly. But it wasn't just the colors or patterns. It was the unsettling way the fabric seemed to shift and move when no one was looking. Subtle, like a creature that knew it should stay still under observation, but couldn't help itself when it was left alone. Graham had no idea of this when he opened his gift. His sister had meant well, of course. Every Christmas, she bought him something ridiculous, and they would laugh about it. Last year, she found him a big-mouthed Billy Bass from the early 2000s. You know, the one that sings? Graham loved it. He has it hanging in his living room. It's still going strong-ish, as it's almost out of battery. But this year's gift, this sweater, he could barely force a chuckle when he unwrapped it. Wool was coarse against his fingers, and just touching it made his skin crawl. The way it hung in his hand, lifeless yet somehow expectant, bothered him more than he wanted to admit.
Thanks.
He muttered half-heartedly, putting on a smile he didn't really feel. Later, once the family festivities had ended, Graham tossed the sweater onto his bed, staring at it with a growing sense of distaste. He couldn't explain why, but the thought of it being in his house, let alone wearing it, made him uneasy. It was just a sweater. As he grabbed it, ready to storm outside and stuff it in the bin, Billy Bass started singing. It made Graham a little spooked, but undeterred to get rid of the sweater.
Good riddance,
he muttered, slamming the lid of the bin shut, whistling the tunes to Billy's song. Out of sight, out of mind, Graham thought to himself. That night, as Graham settled into bed, he tossed and turned, feeling the cold December air through the walls of his old house. The wind howled outside, a storm brewing, and something else. Something softer, quieter. A scratching. He tried to ignore it, assuming it was a branch scraping against the window. But as he drifted off to sleep, the scratching grew louder, more insistent, as if it was no longer outside. It was inside. In the dark of his room, a slithering sound crept along the floor. The sweater, grotesque and alive, had escaped the bin. Its woolen fabrics twitched and squirmed like tiny fingers, dragging itself across the floor towards Graham's bed. Graham shifted in his sleep, unaware, his breath steady. The sweater slid up the bedpost, curling itself along his sheets like a serpent. It moved with unnatural fluidity, its knit structure expanding and contracting as though it were breathing, pulsing with a sinister life force. The reindeers, stitched into the front, no longer looked jolly. They seemed to sneer, their eyes hollow and black. It reached Graham's neck. He stirred slightly, muttering in his sleep, but he did not wake. Slowly the sweater coiled around him, tightening. The woolen strands constricted, sinking deeper into his skin, wrapping tighter with every breath until his chest began to heave. Graham gasped, eyes snapping open, but no sound escaped. The only sounds that he could hear was the tightening of the fabric around his neck and the muffled sound of Big Mouth Billy Bass' final lyrics before its battery was completely drained. By morning, Graham was still. The sweater had settled neatly over his chest, as if he had lovingly pulled it on before drifting to sleep. His face, though frozen in terror, could be mistaken for peaceful contentment, with his hands resting gently on the fabric. Days later, his sister found him, lying peacefully in bed, and the sweater still clinging to him. To her, it looked as though he had simply fallen asleep, wearing the gift she had given to him. There were no signs of struggle, nothing to suggest the horror that had transpired. The house was cleared not long after, with Graham's belongings carefully packed up and donated to the local charity shop. Everything, including the sweater. It sat there again, on the shelf, innocent and unassuming. For a while, it waited, watching. Christmas was coming soon after all. Another Graham would surely come along, and the sweater would be ready.